This lipstick is giving me corn teeth. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Crue Trime. Crue Trime. Crue Trime. Crue Trime. If it's your first time here, welcome. My name is Sarah, and what I do here is tell you a terrible story to ruin your day. And put on my makeup at the same time. So if that sounds like a good time to you, you're in the right place. So make sure you subscribe to this channel, hit the bell notification, and then you will never miss one of my terrible stories. Today's story was recommended over a year ago by a lovely viewer named Sarah Wendel. So yes, the recommendation is over a year old, but it's worth the wait. So thank you, Sarah. Also, Sarah is a level 1 cat lady and an author.
Hi, I put makeup on for this.
So make sure you go check out all of her goods if you're into romantasy stories that feature kick-ass women. I'll link all of her stuff down in the description box, so go check it out. This is the story of Martha Doe Roberts. Okay, here we go. In Eads, Tennessee, a tiny town about 25 miles east of Memphis, lived a lovely couple, 65-year-old Allan Roberts and his wife, Doe Roberts. They had no children of their own, but they shared a very happy life together, living on a 150-acre farm on Great Oaks Road. Allan Crawford Roberts grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. He graduated from Tech High School in 1945, and he served in the Merchant Marines briefly during World War II. When he returned to Shelby County, he worked his way through college, and he eventually opened up a chain of auto parts stores called Holiday Auto Parts. And then later, he got into land development, and he was quite successful. Allan was quite the Renaissance man, actually. He was, a pilot. He was a 32nd degree Mason. He was a beekeeper and a square dancer for most of his life. So yeah, he had gotten really into square dancing, and he got really serious about it after he met a really cute girl named Doe. Martha Eudora Doe Roberts was also a local girl from the area. She was a very kind and generous person. She was the kind of person who, if she was at the grocery store and the person in front of her didn't have enough money, she would buy their groceries for them. She also would take toys to sick children at St. Jude's Hospital. She loved dancing, specifically square dancing. And she had been square dancing with her husband, Allan, for like 30 years. And Allan even became like a professional square dance caller. It's a whole thing. So the point is, Allan and Doe were always together. They were described as salt of the earth people. They were just adorable. Goals. So as I mentioned, Allan was a quite successful land developer, so Doe didn't really need to work. I want to say that she volunteered at the local church. Didn't have like a traditional job. She didn't need one. So she stayed home while Allan did whatever Allan was doing. On August 7th, 1992, Allan and Doe had breakfast together, as they always did, and then Allan left for the day around 10 a.m. That day, in addition to whatever else he was doing, he was supposed to be meeting up with a person named Sam Wagner, who had called, I think the day before, saying that he was interested in making a purchase of land of some kind. So Allan was gone all day, Doe was home all day. And when Allan got home later that evening, he found Doe's car in the driveway as expected, but he noticed that the mail had been brought up from the mailbox at the end of the driveway and was just sitting on like the hood of the car. Strange. When he got inside the house, he called out for Doe. She didn't answer. She wasn't home, which was also strange because Doe was the kind of person who would leave a note if she was just like gonna be working out in the backyard. You know what I mean? Always left a note, never would just disappear. He also found Doe's asthma inhaler on the kitchen countertop. So now he's getting nervous. Doe suffered from some pretty serious asthma, and she never went anywhere without this inhaler. There's no note, she's not answering. This is all just very, very strange immediately. So now he's getting really nervous. Like, what if Doe suffered an asthma attack somewhere out in the yard? So he went outside to look for her. It's getting dark, he can't find her. He started calling friends and neighbors. Nobody had seen her or heard from her. And just when he was about to call the police, the phone rang. So the voice on the other end of the phone sounded male, and the person spoke with a very heavy Asian accent. I'm not going to attempt to replicate it. Just use your imagination. The man claimed to have taken dough and he was demanding $100,000 cash ransom. Then he hung up. Hang on a second. Did the mysterious caller explain where Allan was supposed to bring this ransom, this cash money? No, I guess. So not super effective. So anyway, Allan called the police right away. When they arrived, they immediately were looking all around the property. They took Allan's statement, which I have to say didn't sound great for Allan. I mean, he was the last person to have seen Doe for hours. There was no sign of her anywhere. None of her belongings were missing or even disturbed. There was no sign of forced entry or struggle in the house. And Allan was claiming that some mysterious caller with an Asian accent just so happened to call during the break between him being outside looking for Doe and calling friends and neighbors. I mean,
sure, Jan.
I feel like we've heard this story before. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, so remember Allan was supposed to have been meeting some guy about this land purchase. He didn't know this person, had never met him before. It was just somebody who called him the day before to make an appointment to meet. Bottom line is, the guy never showed up. He was out there sweating in the August Tennessee heat for nothing. So he finally gave up and just, went to another property to do some landscaping work, like sod or something, for the rest of the day, and then he went home to find the empty house. Okay, anyways, so the investigators gave Allan the benefit of the doubt, and they placed a recording device in like a trace on his phone. Perhaps this Asian kidnapper man might call again. But this time, they'd be ready. So later that night, the phone actually rang, and it was the kidnapper. He claimed that he had Doe and she was safe for now, not if Allan keeps cooperating with the police. So somehow this kidnapper knew that there was a recording device on the phone, and he instructed Allan to take the cassette tape out to the driveway and destroy it. Could he see what was going on? So Allan made a big show of it. He took the cassette tape out to the end of the driveway, waved it around for whoever was watching, I guess, and stomped all over it. Well, it was a decoy tape, not the real one. Well, the trace on the phone indicated that the call was coming from a payphone somewhere in town. The deputies quickly found it, but when they got there, no one else was there. The police started canvassing the town, asking around for any information that could be helpful in finding Doe safely. So remember, Allan and Doe lived in like a tiny town. If a stranger had kidnapped Doe, somebody would have noticed. This is like rural Memphis. An outsider would have been seen and remembered. You know what I'm saying. The community also came together. Their church congregation held a vigil to pray for Doe's safe return. Allan met with TV and news reporters. He appeared in a press conference to plead for any information, assistance, and helping to find Doe. He tearfully offered a $10,000 cash reward for information about her whereabouts.
If Doe is released unharmed, I will meet any demand. I will do whatever is necessary to obtain her release.
Well, investigators, of course, were squinting at Allan. I mean, let's be real. It's like almost always the husband, okay? Well, they asked Allan to sit down and take a lie detector test, a polygraph, which he did. He was very cooperative, and in fact, he passed the test. The results from the exam indicated that he was being truthful about the day that Doe disappeared and receiving the weird kidnapper call, all of it. Well, we know that polygraph tests are not an exact science. You know what I'm saying? So the police just needed to look closer. They started digging into Allan's story and this Sam Wagner person that he was supposed to meet that day. Remember, the guy stood him up, so was he involved somehow? Well, the police dug into everything that they could, phone records, every other resource, and they never found any Sam Wagner, which is, sketchy. Like, what if Sam Wagner was the person who kidnapped Doe, or worse, killed her? What if this Sam Wagner was an accomplice that helped Allan Roberts hide Doe's body?
You cannot trust anybody ever.
Well, the police combed over every inch of Allan Roberts' home and the outbuildings on the property, looking for any evidence of a murder. Hair, blood, spatters, weapons. Aside from Allan's loose, weird alibi, they had nothing. As I mentioned, they were canvassing the town, talking to all the friends and neighbors, and some witnesses came forward, particularly some of the square dancing friends, and they didn't like the way that Allan was acting. They thought he was acting a little too normal, you know, like too cool, too calm, not emotional enough for somebody whose wife disappeared into thin air and, let's face it, was probably dead somewhere. They also didn't like that Allan seemed to be, you know, getting back into normal life. He was even out socializing and square dancing with other partners.
Just as I thought. Trash.
So a month went by with no new leads, no new information, but the calls started happening again. This time, this weird kidnapper, Asian-voiced male started calling friends and neighbors. He told them that Doe was still alive, that he was holding her. Also, Allan Roberts was definitely in on it. Those phone calls were also traced to phone booths in the local area, but nobody was ever intercepted. I mean, I have questions, like how many phone booths are there? Could they not just stake them out? I'm just saying. Apparently, Allan Roberts and the Roberts family were not super psyched with the way that the investigation was going, and they decided to do whatever they could to help advance things. So Allan Roberts took out an ad in the local paper begging for any information that would lead to Doe's safe return, and he even upped the reward to $25,000 cash. He also specified in the ad that he had disconnected the phone monitoring equipment, so whoever this kidnapper was could feel secure and free to call at any time. No worries with police. You know, they could make their deal or arrangements, whatever. I'm sure it was worded better than I just articulated. So on October 8th, full 2 months after Doe disappeared, the mystery caller started calling Allan Roberts again. Well, I guess that ad worked, so it shows how much I know. This time, he told Allan to drive to a payphone at a country store about a mile away. When he got there, the phone was already ringing, so he picked it up and it was the voice of this Asian male kidnapper. He assured Allan that Doe was still alive and he was ready to make a trade. The kidnapper wanted to work through an intermediary, so Allan Roberts recommended one of his close friends and a fellow church member named Charles Lord. So Charles Lord, as I mentioned, was a member of their church. He was the treasurer. He was a very trusted and respected community member, and he actually also made a public plea to the kidnapper to reach out to him directly, and they could discuss how and when that he could bring this ransom to make the trade for Doe. So the kidnapper pretty quickly reached out to Charles Lord. He was also still calling other community members, but he never ever in any of these calls relayed any specific instructions. Like, dude, that's not how ransom works. So another month of useless phone calls went by. Charles Lord actually asked investigators to come to his home. You know, this time he had some good information to pass. He said that recently he had heard some cars driving around in his neighborhood late at night, which was unusual. The night before he called the police, he actually went out to his mailbox with an old-fashioned ransom note inside. You know what I'm talking about, right? Like the kind where the letters are all like clipped out of magazines and other things, you know, so that you can't examine the handwriting or whatever. Well, this letter demanded an $80,000 ransom. Didn't it start off at $100,000? Something like that? So it's like a discount now. Okay, so now the police have physical evidence, right? This letter they have in hand. So they're examining it, and it actually wasn't super helpful because Charles Lord had shown it to a bunch of other people, so it was covered with his fingerprints and their fingerprints, fibers, you know, it was just not great. Also, it had no instructions on how to, like, where is the money supposed to get dropped? Is there a phone number? Nothing. Just saying, dude, like, if you want somebody to pay you a ransom, you have to tell them where to take the money. Okay, you know what? Fine. If you want to keep fucking around, we got you. Okay? So the cops came out to Charles Lord's house and they set up surveillance. They bugged his phone, they put cameras up on the property in case the kidnapper came by and dropped off another note. So at this point, Charles Lord is very involved. Like, too involved. So he was coming around to the police station, asking for status. You know, he had a lot of questions. I mean, Allan Roberts had asked him to act as the intermediary, and they were very close friends, so like, was that weird? Anyway, these phone calls to Charles Lord kept happening, and he would tell investigators the content of the conversations, but here's the funny thing. None of the calls recorded, which is weird because they had set up wiretaps and recording devices, but their equipment wasn't working. Also, another ransom note appeared in the mailbox. So the cops were like, well, shit, awesome. Let's check the surveillance footage and see what this person looks like that dropped it off. There was some kind of interruption in the footage.
I just thought we had poor equipment, and eventually it became apparent that somebody was tampering with it.
All right, so this is weird. You know, it's also weird that Allan Roberts came to the police station to let them know about a very sketchy meeting that he had with Charles Lord the night before. In a private meeting with Charles Lord wearing a gun on his hip, very obviously, told Allan that he could get dough back for a price. He apparently knew some like shady type underground personalities that could be very helpful in locating someone who had been kidnapped. What? Okay, sure. The police aren't any closer to finding her. It's like she disappeared into thin air. There's no evidence, there's no leads besides these weird phone calls that just keep happening with no instructions. Ransom notes. Charles Lord thinks he's in an episode of The Sopranos or something. Like, what's happening? A whole 7 months after Doe disappears, the local news affiliate started getting these phone calls from the man with the Asian accent. So obviously it's the kidnapper, and now he's calling the news. This guy is wild. Also, the news had been tracking this story, you know, since Doe disappeared 7 months ago. So they were ready. They recorded the phone call, and then they put it on the air.
What can you tell us about Doe Roberts?
Investigators agreed to WMC TV airing the tape, hoping it might flush the kidnapper out. It worked.
Well, the kidnapper was pissed off. You know, he called back like, how dare you put me on blast like that? Anyways, well, the reporter finally got this kidnapper person to provide instructions on the ransom drop. Also, by the way, the reporter definitely had alerted police to this phone call situation. So, like, they were part of this sting to try to catch this kidnapper guy. Okay, so they followed the instructions. They go to the ransom drop location with the $80,000 in cash under the watchful eye of some strategically placed, you know, undercover police vehicles. The kidnapper never showed up. Also, the police, remember, they're kind of squinting at Charles Lord, so they had eyes on him that night, and he had never left his house. Strange. The whole thing is so strange. Was this a prank or something? So weird. Cut to June 1993. The kidnapper is still calling random people, still demanding ransom, still not providing instructions, but then he calls Doe's nephews and arranged a ransom drop. He got them to bring the cash out to a local motel. So these nephews were supposed to go to this motel and then, you know, wait for a phone call or some kind of movement for this ransom drop. Finally, a man approached the motel. He went to the room where the nephews were waiting, and the man was Charles Lord. He told the nephews that he had gotten a phone call from the kidnapper telling him to go to this motel and then pick up the cash and then, you know, wait for another call to be given the location of the drop. Well, the nephews were like, no, we want to deal with the kidnapper directly. So, spoiler alert, they were dealing with the kidnapper. Anybody surprised? Anyone? Well, Charles Lord left the motel in a huff and just went home, but the cops were all over him like stink on shit. So they had been looking into him, but now they really had a reason to investigate. So they found out that Charles Lord owed a lot of money to a lot of people. Well, that little factoid gave them enough probable cause to get a search warrant for his home. And when they executed the search, they found all kinds of evidence. that confirmed that Charles Lord owed money, he had a record of embezzlement, and, not great news for the church that he was the treasurer for. He had been stealing money from them. Well, what they didn't find in the house was any evidence that would link him to Doe Roberts. There was no kind of foul play, no clothing, no blood, no hair, no nothing. But they knew something was up with this guy. On August 25th, 1993, the investigators brought in Charles Lord for questioning. And this part is really interesting. They knew that they were dealing with somebody who, I guess, thinks that they're untouchable, right? They staged that interrogation room with, boxes. Those boxes that they keep files in. They labeled them all with his name to make it look like they had been really looking into him for a long, long time and that they had a lot of information. Those boxes were empty. They wanted to get him super paranoid, as to what they might know, which was, not a lot. Okay, so Charles Lord admitted to staging some of those kidnapper calls, but he claimed he did it just to keep the attention going in the search for Doe. If the calls stopped, the investigation would dry up, and he didn't want that. All he wanted was to help his dear friend find his beloved wife. Okay, all right, bet. So the investigators told him that if he would sit for a polygraph test and pass, they would leave him alone. They would drop him as a suspect and move on. But if he failed, he had to agree to sit and do further interviews with them. He agreed to this. You guys don't take polygraph tests, ever. Well, as soon as he sat down and they started asking him about Doe, the shit started going wild. We all know that the test results, they're not admissible in court, but that wasn't the deal they made, remember? He had already agreed to talk with them if the test indicated deception, which it did. So they started leaning on him hard until he cracked, which he did. Well, sort of. At first, Charles Lord told them that he and Doe were having an affair. He said that he picked up Doe that day like he normally did, and he tried to convince her to give him a bunch of money. And when that didn't work, he decided then to hold her for ransom.
What?
Well, the cops did not buy that version of the story, so he switched it up. He then admitted to concocting an elaborate plan that he had been working on for months to kidnap Doe in exchange for a hefty ransom. He knew that Allan Roberts had a lot of money, and he made a phony phone call pretending to be Sam Wagner, the land buyer, to get Allan out of the house. So knowing that Allan would be gone, he went to their home. He saw Doe outside. He tricked her into coming willingly into his car by saying that Allan had been in a terrible accident. Come with me and I'll take you to him. He claimed that he had always intended to return Doe, but she suffered a fatal heart attack in the car, and then he panicked, and he said that he dumped her and her belongings off of a bridge over the Wolf River. Shit, a lot of good that's gonna do. It had been a year. A year had passed since this allegedly occurred. The body was supposed to be in this murky, muddy river. Well, they did send out a group of divers, dozens of them, and they searched every inch, in their special way, almost a half-mile length of this river. They found nothing. No clothing, no handbag, no nothing from the handbag, no bones, no body, no nothing. The investigators went back to Charles Lord to confront his bullshit. She ain't there. So his story changed again. Finally ready to tell the truth, he told them that Doe did not have a heart attack. He had taken her back to his house and tied her up. And within hours of kidnapping her, he tried to kill her by force-feeding her sleeping pills. That didn't work, so he smothered her with a pillow. He also sexually assaulted her. Because of course he did. By the way, that explains why he tried to claim that they were having an affair, because he knew when the police found her body that they might find, some of his DNA in her you-know-where. At some point, he had stripped off all of her clothing, he burned them, and then he buried her body in his backyard under a compost heap. He had never planned to release her back to her husband. Well, not knowing, again, whether or not the cops are getting sent on a wild goose chase, because it's a bullshit story, they still had to try to substantiate the story. So they went out to his home on August 30th, 1993, my birthday. They brought in forensic anthropologists from the body farm at the University of Tennessee, and they got to digging at Charles' home. And within 2 hours, they found Doe Roberts. When Charles Lord decided to bury Doe Roberts on his property, he dug a shallow grave and then sprinkled her body with lye and concrete before covering it up with compost. So what he thought was going to speed up decomposition actually preserved her. Out of the rape charges on account of there wasn't any evidence aside from his confession to support his supposed guilt. Anyway, vindicated and officially cleared of any wrongdoing, Allan Roberts laid his beloved wife Doe to rest. Her funeral was attended by over 400 people, more than half were her beloved square dancing community members. The funeral was held exactly 13 months after she disappeared. 12 years later, on October 16th, 2005, the then 75-year-old Allan Roberts passed away and was laid to rest next to Doe. In 2016, Charles Lord died in prison of natural causes. Good riddance. And that is the story of Doe Roberts. Thanks again to Sarah Wendel for recommending this terrible story. I appreciate you. Make sure you guys check down below for the links to all of Sarah's books. Also, if you want to know any of the makeup that I might have used in today's video, just look down in the description box. Everything is linked if it's still available. If it's not, I will link something similar. Thank you so much for hanging out today and for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this one, then make sure you subscribe to this channel before you leave today. I upload new videos here on YouTube every week, and you can follow me on most of the other socials as well. That is it for now. I will catch you next time in the next video. Bye! Video. Shh. Oh, shit. I'm going wild today with this makeup. I don't know if it's gonna turn out. I don't think that's the right lip look. Oh, I think I just ruined it. Is that even? Crawford robots.